author session with Simon Wright, who's just published the Don't Panic Guide, the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Service Systems and Services. I just need to make sure I get the title absolutely right, which launched just in time for the ASEC, just before around about November last year. We got the pleasure to be joined by the author, Simon Wright. My name is John Holt. I'm the current technical director of Incosi UK, and we're here really just to learn a little bit more about the book and the whole process and some of the rationale behind it, and really just to get an insight into, it's quite scary, into Simon's mind and the way that it works, and the way that we ended up where we are today. So welcome, Simon. It's good to see you again. So
lovely to see you again.
Good, excellent. So first of all, the question we ask everybody: what was your motivation for writing this book in the first place? What made you do it?
Apart from lockdown, of course, so I had to find something to do in lockdown. But it's something that's bugged me since about 2004, and it came to a head, I guess, in 2014. In 2004, I started my own individual consultancy, and prior to that, I was very product orientated. Everything there was a thing that I was doing, designing, building, testing, whatever. And then when I started my one-man consultancy, I had to sell me, and I'm not a product, I'm a service. And that actual realization did take me a couple of years to work out, and then realizing how you sell a service is and present it and show the benefits of a service is very different to products. So I sort of became acclimatized to this idea of services, and then it came to a head in 2014 when I was asked to help the Norwegian Army deliver basically a new howitzer, a new artillery piece. And that was the original brief, but when I got there, basically they needed a new capability. And we actually had to look at not just delivering products, but also all the services that are needed to support it over the next 30 odd years. So that was prior to that, as I said, in my consultancy work, I was still working with products, but this was the first time when I'd been asked to actually look at delivering that whole capability and a whole set of services. Now, I got a bit concerned because when I thought of, for example, first thing I always do is a stakeholder analysis, and trying to fit that a product-centric stakeholder analysis for a service, it didn't work. And all the names are wrong, and I was at sea for quite a while. But suddenly a sort of a light bulb went on in my head, and I started changing the names, which I'd never done before, on the stakeholder diagram, and realizing that actually all the tools and techniques that I've used over the, 35, 40 years of being a systems engineer do work for services, where services are delivering outcomes rather than outputs. So that sort of light bulb moment, I thought, well, I wanted to capture that for posterity.
Okay,
so that's
excellent.
The motivation.
Right. So, and it's interesting because that's a really sort of pragmatic drive behind it. It's not this, I've got a good idea, I'm going to write a book on it. So it's actually, and did you find that there's a sort of lack of literature available? I mean, so where's the need for this book then?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I did do in 2015, when I was doing this services, I suddenly found out that the Incosi UK had a service systems engineering group. So I went along to one of their meetings, and they have been fantastic. The people in that working group have been really helpful in bursting my idea balloons, which were a load of rubbish. Until eventually we left with something that actually sort of made sense. So going along to those meetings was really useful, to say the least. To peer group review is always the best way to improve the quality of any systems engineering work. So I've forgotten the question.
The literature out there. So
literature. So then they had written, done an analysis of the literature, and they were saying, yeah, because I was asking, what is the literature? And they were saying there isn't very much out there at all. And there was something on what was called product service systems, PSS, and that really didn't cover what I was dealing with. It was a pure service that we were trying to develop, or rather a suite of services to deliver a capability. So yeah, there wasn't really very much in the literature, and particularly case studies, because I love to study case studies, which is why then I wrote the 2018 papers.
Is that the one that won an award, perchance?
Yes, perchance it did indeed. Thank you. Because I wanted to get a real worked case study out there, so that people could look at it and then parallel what they were doing against it and see what worked and what didn't work. Yeah. So yeah, the lack of literature. There was some. I think there's a tome about this thick, which talks about, which is called Service Systems Engineering, and I thought, yeah, I can't afford it. I can't afford the cost of it. I can't afford the time to go and read all the way through it. I needed something that was, guess what, a completely beginner's guide. Yeah, to it.
And it's interesting you say that, because to talk about me for a minute, which is obviously we've been missing that so far in this conversation. It's funny you say that, because the original motivation for when we started this line, for the one that Simon Perry and I wrote on model-based systems engineering, we'd previously written a 1,000-page volume like that, and people were saying exactly what you were saying. One is it's intimidating, can you really invest a year of your life reading through this fairly dry? And so what we need is something that's accessible. So, and in fact, when you put this proposal in, so as people are aware, I'm the technical director, but also Simon Perry is the series editor. And so the question that I always ask Simon is there a gap in the market for this at this moment in time? And we did a quick sort of literature survey, and the thing that we concluded is there's plenty of books with like a chapter or a few paragraphs on services, but very little actually dedicated to it. And interestingly, as you say, very, very few case studies indeed. And in fact, even in my background in MBSE, there's a variation on one of the modeling language called service-oriented modeling. And you look at that, and it's to be honest, it's good, but it's quite lightweight. And you look at the examples and the case studies that they use, and they're so trivial as to almost be, irrelevant in a way. And so I think we fully agree with you there, Simon. I think it's refreshing to see, this level and, pitching it at this absolute beginner. So how did you find the writing style then? So bearing in mind that I know usually you're used to writing more formal papers and so on, it's a very different style that we adopt for the Don't Panic guides. And I think you've hit it really well. You've hit the style absolutely perfectly. So how did you find writing in this very different style?
Intriguing. I was able to do two things which helped. First of all, I read the other 4 guides and saw what the style was like. But also I do other talks which are trying to simplify difficult concepts down to the absolute basics. And so and because I'm active in my church and I do some preaching, and that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so that using that style, but then that's a verbal style rather than a written style. Yeah. So yes, reading the other guides was very useful. Being married to an English graduate was very useful. I could get instant feedback on what I said. Yeah. Or what I shouldn't say, or that doesn't make sense, or I don't understand it. It was really useful. So
I'm assuming, Simon, that's a graduate in English, not a graduate who is English. Well, probably both, but
yes, English literature graduate, absolutely. So that was exactly helpful, and also the peer group review via the Service Systems Engineering group. And they were all very, very helpful. I'm gonna pick out one person, Andrew Funkham, who always asks the difficult question. Yeah, which he's made a career out of it, isn't he? So. He has. And when you get over the fact that he's not having to go at you at all, he's trying to help you. Yeah. I found his comments really useful. So it's and I've tried to acknowledge that in the beginning of the book. As well, and I guess also in my mind was the non-English speaker, because
Yes.
I worked an awful lot in countries where English is the second language.
Mm.
And so thinking about how that works, how you phrase things so that it's easy to understand, and then giving actual real world examples. I think one of the examples I like, we're going to go back to stakeholders. I was trying to think, how do you know, what's the analogy to stakeholders? And that's where I use the analogy of actors.
Yes.
And
yes.
I thought that explaining that Harrison Ford plays the romantic lead is sort of, that was the analogy that I gave, and I thought that was the one I was most proud of. That really, I think, spoke to people very simply, easily, and got the concept over very rapidly.
Mm. Okay, so Andrew Farncombe, just for people's benefit who aren't as old as we are, previous technical director of Encosi UK, and also the technologies just started to work, and we've just been joined by Simon Perry as well, who's the series editor, which is the voice that you can hear, and he's finally got his broadband working, so that's good that he's joined us. And it's interesting what you say, though, because I mean, when we were talking about the style, and you say you're used to this more talking to people and the preachy style of thing, and that's very much the style that the book's sort of written in, and that's when, and again, when Simon and I first wrote it, and we sat down saying, well, how are we going to pitch this? And it was, well, we were saying, well, let's imagine we were just stood up in front of people and we were trying to explain this. And I think something that comes out is that's the communication aspect of what we got in the book is very clear. And again, nice examples that everybody can associate with. Because of course, the danger is whenever you pick any case study, you say, let's pick a car, and everyone goes, oh, I don't work in automotive. Let's pick an aeroplane. You know, let's talk about Harrison Ford. We all love Indiana Jones, we all love Star Wars, and so on. So, and I think that's a really nice aspect of the book that comes through, is that this is clearly, to use nerd language that Simon and I would use, this has clearly been play tested. You know, this has been through the, this isn't the first time you've spoken about this to people. And I think that comes across very, very clearly in the book, which is the exact tone that we've been looking for through all of that. So, and how do you see yourself sort of using this book? If you do you think you'll be using it as part of your work, or just using it for bragging rights, or what will you?
No, absolutely. So part of the consultancy work that I normally do would be introducing systems engineering into companies which are not formally using systems engineering. But then all my material for my training and consultancy was product based, because I normally meet with products. Yeah. But now I'm trying to mine the rich vein of, well, actually, do you want to move away from products and actually deliver services? Because the nice thing about a service is that services are around for a very long time, and you can actually make a lot more money servicing a system over 25 years than the initial capital purchase. So, and we see a lot of companies that have done that already. One of the surprising aspects that I found, I did a research into how much of our GDP is product and how much is service.
And that's one of the headlines on the back of the book. And I must say, when I saw that, I went, really? You know, so big reveal, Simon, what's the percentage?
Off the top of my head, it was about just after the war. I think service systems were just about very similar, if not slightly less than products. But it's now over 85%.
Yeah,
now.
Wow. And that's really something, isn't it?
Yeah, because particularly if you're like me, spent at least 30 years thinking product, and then suddenly, hold on here, that's not where the market is. The market is in services.
I mean, and let me take you back to one of your earlier comments. I mean, you mentioned capability, and you know, we try and avoid the C word when we're doing these sort of talks. But and it's one of those terms. It's used extensively in sort of aerospace and defence and those sorts of fields. Now, I've never met two people who have got the same definition of capability, even people that work together. So how would you define something like a capability? Is it this combination of product or service? Is there more to it? How would you define that in just your own opinion, Simon?
Thank you. I like that one. So it goes back to is there a gap in the market? And the gap in the market that I perceived was that if you got products, all right, then you go to product systems, and there's lots of stuff in that area. In terms of enterprises, which deliver capabilities, there was a lot of, enterprise architect, a lot of architecture, whatever. And then there's this system of systems that I hate that phrase, but never mind, I'm going to use it. And there was lots of work on systems of systems, enterprises, product systems, product. What's this middle bit that was missing? And the middle bit is services and service systems. So I actually see it as a spectrum from products, product systems, providing services from service systems, which combine to make capabilities which are delivered by enterprises to system of systems. So this continuum or spectrum of complexity and complexity. That's where I see the capabilities. So I see that a capability is delivered by a collaboration of services.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's a definition
absolutely.
for you.
And from what you've been saying, services obviously, I like this idea of this spectrum. Services are obviously applying across the spectrum. It's not just a niche in this life cycle stage you consider services. It's something that you need to be thinking about all the way through.
Absolutely. And the feeling I get is that if we just simply view our deliverable as a product from a product system, we need a different viewpoint and look at it from the service point of view.
Yes, yeah.
And you need both. This is the key element, I would say, is that this is not, oh, services is it, that's all you need to worry about. Not at all. We've got to have these separate viewpoints so that we get a holistic view of systems.
And I think you're right. And it's something that I know, Simon and I spend a lot of our lives talking about is, the context. And it's this combination of these different contexts or viewpoints that give you the whole picture, if it were. And I really think that the service viewpoint or the service concept is often neglected as well in real systems, and it's something that's just kind of assumed, or it's done as an afterthought, or whatever it's going to be. And so I think I fully agree with you. It's this combination, isn't it? Things rarely stand by themselves, particularly in the world of systems engineering, but it is this bringing these different contexts together, these different viewpoints. Is it a product? Is it a service? And we're starting to see this with all sorts of companies now. In fact, I'm trying to think now, can I think of any product that actually doesn't have a service element to it? And I don't think you can, because things aren't, we've got to get away from this siloed, this is the product mentality, So I think that's very important. So I'm going to ask Simon Perry now. Have you got anything to add on that front, Simon? Because I know this is something that we come across in Simon Perry and I work together. So this is something that we come across quite a lot, is people not taking into consideration things like services and so on, amongst other contexts.
Yes, I mean a lot of the the systems that we work on, part of the deliverables might be, for example, training courses or training material or maintenance, and for a lot of organizations it feels very much like that's almost something that they think about right at the end of the project. We better do the training material now, or we better specify how this system has to be maintained, whereas really that they're services that are deliverables and need to be baked in right from the start of the work, rather than something that's just added on at the end. I actually think a lot of organizations don't do any engineering at all of those types of services. It is, we'll get Fred to write the training manuals or Bob to write the maintenance procedures. I've worked in my past life. I've worked in organisations, particularly, for example, in rail, where the company makes a profit on every train they build, but actually the most money they make is the 25 or 30-year service contract that they hope they get for that train. So I think it was great when you put forward this idea, because it really does, address a big gap in how systems engineering is done, and we do need to sort of make people aware that there are often service aspects of lots and lots of different systems that sometimes get neglected, I think. And I think your book's a really, really useful and powerful way to get people to think about that.
Thank you. One of the reasons I think that, and this is pure speculation, why the service aspects have been possibly not given sufficient focus is we talk about viewpoints. My feeling is that with a product, our view is very much inward looking. It's looking into the product, and that's really fascinating and interesting and really great. And that's a problem with us nerds is we tend to can be in our professional life quite inward looking, but you need to look in the opposite direction when it comes to services. You've got to be more outward looking. And that requires a very good stakeholder analysis in the first instance to know who to go and talk to about, well, who are the trainees? What are they going to be like? There's no point in creating a training course where you need a PhD in quantum mechanics, I don't know, to actually understand it. So it's that outward looking aspect that I think is really important. The viewpoint is outward rather than inward.
And Simon, do you think this is an indication of the maturity of MBS of systems engineering? So if we go back 10, 15, 20 years, but it was all about the product. It was all about the product. And now that systems engineering is becoming a lot more natural now. It's no longer trying to sell you systems engineering. People are accepting that now, and now they're using it. People are starting to realize, well, there's more to it than just the product. So do you think this is an indication of the maturity of systems engineering and the acceptance of systems engineering in industry increasing?
Yes, my experience is exactly that. I would say since 2004, when I started my systems engineering consultancy, it was a hard sell. Now it's not so much as there are other difficulties now associated with the sell, but it's not the fact that systems engineering is, this is new. Well, no, it isn't. It's been around for a long time, but yes, I think it's far more, it's not better understood. It's just more broad. More people are thinking in a systems. I think it's just the phrase systems engineering is now far more commonplace. In fact, I was talking with a friend of mine at the weekend, and he is in the automotive area, but from the road signaling point of view. And he was telling me, I was saying, how's work with you? And he said, it's gone very well over the last few years because we moved over to a service orientated viewpoint. And I said, tell me about it. And he went on about, and although he never used the word systems engineering, it was all more about electronic engineering and communications and things like that. But he was talking in systems language, which I found very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting because, I think I've shared similar experiences as well. And I think it's just becoming more the norm now, isn't it? And as it does become more normal, it's natural to say, well, actually, can we expand this a bit? And what are we missing? Because we have been focused very much on products. And we're starting to see in many of the contracts that we see now, actually, a systems engineering approach is specified as part of the contract now. And it's very interesting because most of the contracts that we now get involved with, again, aren't for products. It's for, our job is to deliver a rail service, for example, an air service, a power service or whatever. And it's not defined anymore. We want you to deliver an engine. We want you to deliver, as you said, a capability that will be so many megawatts per hour or whatever it's going to be. And I think the world's definitely changing for the better in that respect. And I think this is why this publication is quite timely. So I want to just have a switch the focus of the discussion now to the we mentioned that we thought there was a gap in the market in terms of your actually writing of the book. So for people that aren't aware, the way that the books are written is you write a proposal, it gets sent to me as the technical director. I then basically say, is it a valid area in terms of systems engineering? It then goes to 3 reviewers. Okay, so it's a single blind thing. So the author doesn't know who the reviewers are, but the reviewers do know who the author is in this case, unlike when we do, for example, the ASEC papers, which is double blind. And the reason for that is the reviewers need to know that the author is an expert in the field and that they're well known in the field and that they can acknowledge it. So it goes to 3 reviewers. They then review the proposal and say whether they think it's good or not as a technical proposal. So bear in mind, I've already said that I think it's a valid area. Then it goes over to Simon Perry as a series editor, and we say, is this timely? So Simon Perry, do you want to say a couple of words about that? Because basically then, because we've had a number of proposals where Simon's actually come back and said, yeah, but this isn't the right time for this. Do you just want to say a few words on that side?
Yeah, I mean, there are no hard and fast rules to that. It's what's the phrase? It's almost being aware of the zeitgeist, I think is the German expression, of what things are, starting to come up in conversations that, that we have, with other colleagues that we might come across at presentations, and just, trying to be aware of a feel of the kind of areas that are starting to appear and I mean, for example, one thing I would be really keen for somebody to do, and this is the first John's heard about this, is a don't panic guide to soft systems methodology, because again, that's an area that, over the last few ASEC conferences, we've had a number of papers submitted on soft systems, and again, it's something that on a lot of the consultancy and training I do that I get asked about. So part of my job is to sort of, almost sort of keep an ear to the ground of the kind of topics that are coming up and people are asking us questions about. Gives me an idea, but also to look across the sort of whole series of the books as well and see whether, it fits in with a kind of idea of the Don't Panic books. And, we as John said, as we've had some things been suggested that have been very, very, let's say, cutting edge. And it's just not the right time to do a Don't Panic guide on them yet, because they're topics that are, so cutting edge that nobody other than maybe 3 people in the world are working on them, and that wouldn't get through as a Don't Panic guide because there's no need for it. So it's a little bit subjective, but based on direct experience of the work that I do, that the conversations I have, the things that I get to see for ASEC, because although I also get to see all of the papers before they're presented, because I pull together all of the proceedings, and just sort of looking, as I say, to see what topics are starting to become, important to people, and that's normally a good time to get a Don't Panic out if we can.
Yeah. Okay, so once it's gone through the initial the review of the proposal, and so I said yes, it's a valid topic. The reviewers all say technically it's good. And Simon said he thinks the time's right. He then goes back to the author, so in this case Simon Wright. So just tell us a little bit about your experience of the writing process, Simon. So we've already mentioned that it's quite a different style. So how long did it take you to write? Were there any problems that you came across? Did you enjoy the writing process? What can you tell us about the whole process?
Well, I gave myself a schedule, and basically a chapter a month.
Okay.
So I think it came out about, well, there's 6 big chapters and a couple of little ones at the end when I realized there were a couple of bits I should cover. So it was a fairly concentrated 6 months to write, and I was trying. Of course, the problem is the moment you get to chapter 2, you realise that chapter 1 needs improvement, and then when you get to chapter 3, you realise that actually 2 and 1 need to think, and then suddenly you realise that chapter 2 actually is chapter 4, and that sort of thing. So there's thank good. I mean, if if we didn't have computers, I would have failed miserably, because there's an awful lot of moving stuff around, to say the least. But I found that enjoyable. And whenever I received a critique, it hurt to begin with, because I thought it was really good. But all the critiques I got from so many people was so helpful. Indeed, there's so many, I couldn't really speak to everybody, but I'd like to thank everybody who reviewed it, either blind or non-blind or whatever. They were really useful, really helpful. And I wouldn't, so my advice, if somebody's thinking of getting one, is get yourself a support environment, get yourself some people around you, and don't expect John or Simon to actually do it for you at all. They're coordinators. They've got plenty of other stuff to do in their lives, and get people around you that will help you and be honest with you. Not just say, oh, it's a wonderful thing. No, chapter 4 really does need a rewrite, that sort of stuff.
I mean, that's a really interesting point, because one of the reviewers, the role, obviously they're there to review, but once you got past the first, they've accepted your proposal, what you have to bear in mind, and we've had this, it's not been a problem, but it's something that's occurred with a couple of our authors, and the reviewers have come back with comments, and it's, no, once I've accepted your proposal, the reviewers really want that proposal to be successful. And so when they are making the comments, it's as you say, Simon, as you're reading these comments, they're doing that because they want it to be the best publication it can be, so, and if they're saying this needs to be moved to this chapter, or have you thought about this, it's actually very constructive. So it's not like sometimes if you talk at a conference or whatever, and some people can be a little bit let's say picky in the audience, you know who you are, but some people can be a little bit picky in the, it's not like that. And you have to bear in mind, particularly once they've said this is a good proposal, all three of those reviewers want to see that book published. I want to see it published. Simon Perry wants to see it published. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. They're not there to rip it apart or to find fault with it. They're there to say, how can we make this better? How can we make this the best product ever? And so one of the things that Simon and I sort of both love and dread at the same time is when we get the first complete draft in, because Simon and I sit there and go, oh no, who's going to be the first one to open this? Is this going to be brilliant, or is it going to be terrible? And invariably, it's just our paranoia kicking in, but invariably they're very good. And so from our point of view, that's really sort of reassuring. But I think that's part of the review, making sure we get the right authors and so on. And again, particularly, I think in your case, Simon, you seem to have taken to, because it is a very different writing style, as you said earlier. You seem to have taken to it very, very well. So maybe this is your preachy background, I was going to say, but I mean that in both a literal and a but yeah, so it's been very good. So the other thing we always ask people is because there's something obviously I've written some books, but there is, apart from obviously the birth of your children, when the thing arrives on your doorstep and you open it for the first time and you hold it in your arms and you go, and then of course what happens that you've alluded to already, Simon, is you open it up just to have a little look, and the first page you look at, you spot a mistake. So
I have one of the rare misprint versions.
This is like a postage stamp with the Queen's head on backwards or something like that.
Where I've pasted over the correct graphics into my copy. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Simon Perry, because this is one of the advantages of the way that we publish at Incosi UK. Now, when we published the first book at Incosi UK, Simon Perry and I were heavily involved in it. Obviously, we've been involved with publishers before. Okay, and so I've got 4 publishers at the moment. Simon's got 3 or 4, and to be blunt, I hope there's no publishers listening to this. It's awful most of the time. It's a really painful, long, drawn-out experience. So we said, look, it's not going to be like that. How can we change it? And one of the things that has made a big difference, and it's interesting that you said, Simon, thank goodness for computers. That does date you, to be fair, Simon. But one of the things is this idea of print on demand. because, for example, one of the publishers that Simon and I published through, they print off 1,000 copies, they go into a warehouse, they sit there till they're sold. If you spot a mistake, you have to wait till all 1,000 have sold, and then they won't update them until you write the next version. So sometimes it can be like 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Now, one of the big advantages of print on demand is that we print off very small print runs, and if we find a mistake, it can be corrected. So Simon Perry, I'm just going to ask you, can you say a few words about that? Because that's one of the areas that you're in control of that process, essentially, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, I am. So you're part of my job as series editor, as well as making sure all of the books, you know, are consistent in look and feel, is also sort of liaising with Incozy and making sure they've got the most up-to-date versions of the, you know, the content of the book, the cover, if we spot issues. But the great thing is, you know, if a reader or the author,
version 1.1. So
so every book's a version. In fact, I need to write a .1 in mine as I've updated it. In fact, I'm going to do it now. Yeah.
So this configuration control process sounds quite useful.
Who'd have thought, eh? Yeah, so you know, so whenever you know any mistakes are found, or you know, it could be that something's changed or a reference needs changing, but because you know they're electronic, it means the author can make that change, send me the new, you know, the new Word document. I generate the PDF and send it to Incozy and say, you know, for the next print run, use the new book. I mean, in fact, I don't know what our latest version is of our. I'll have to find the actual electronic one, but I think our Don't Panic. It's it's something ridiculous.
Yeah. But what's great is we have absolute control over the whole process, and with our previous publishers, you don't. There comes a point where you press send and it goes off, and who knows what comes back. And honestly,
and who knows when it'll come back? Is the other thing.
And the timing, well, that's a very good point as well. Because, for example, one of our publishers, we send the electronic copy, it then goes to proofreaders who change everything, then we have to say, no, we were right, you were wrong, change it all back. And then it can be, I would say, around about 9 months for this one publisher. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
With the way that we do it at Incozy UK is once you've got the final PDF, it's the physical copies that are there within a week. And it's that fast. You know, and as I say, bear in mind this one, the second it went out, there's a mistake in it. Right, we updated it, and so there's only about 10 copies of this, the original 1.0 with the with the incorrect diagram. We can update things very, very quickly. It's not just mistakes. So, for example, in a number of them, we might quote a standard, and then that might be superseded by something else. So it's very easy for us to just say, well, I'll tell you what, on the next release of the book, we'll update that reference. You know, and there are things like that happen. So, for example, we quote the Incozy 2025 vision. Now the Incozy 2035 vision's out. So what we can do now is go back to all the points that reference that and just update it. So we have absolute control over it. The royalty system, bear in mind, it was designed by myself and Simon, maximizes the benefits for the authors. Should we put it that way? So what's your overall experience, Simon Wright, then, of the overall writing and publishing in terms of Incozy UK, of the overall process?
The overall process, it was thoroughly enjoyable, to say the least. I found it objective, which was good. That the critiques that I received, I could see exactly why people have made the comment that they had made. Apart from getting the first edition out with an error, that was a bit disappointing, to say the least. But equally, the fact that it can be updated so quickly and so easily, one wonders why anybody would do anything else that way.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, some of the your errors, minor. I don't know if I've got the things behind me, but one of the books that we published came out. There was a mistake with the printer. Oh, hang on, I've got it here. And our team storming book that should have looked like that and it came out looking like that because there was a slight slip up with the file management at the printers, and they didn't print the cover on it. This is the inside cover. So look completely blank. But again, we'd only printed off a handful so we could look at them. The very first Think Engineer had the pages, instead of 1 or 2 on a double spread, they were 1, turn over to page 2. So none of the artwork worked. But this we've learned from this. So yours is actually relatively.
I didn't edit Think Engineer.
Simon wasn't involved in that one. That's when we realised we needed a series editor. Right, I'm going to do something now, which is not like me. I'm going to put somebody else on the spot now and ask them their opinion of the whole process, because I've just noticed that one of our observers is Andrew Pemberton. Now, Andrew Pemberton, for those of you who don't know, is the current president-elect of Incosa UK. So, Andrew, are you there?
He's got mute on at the moment.
Oh, no, there he is. There he is.
Thank you very much.
So, Andrew, I know you weren't expecting this. We haven't set anything up. So,
no, this is completely off. The more you talk, the more I could hear it coming. Kind of like the birdie song at a wedding.
Yeah. So Pemby, what's your, give us a few thoughts on what you think of Simon's book, the Don't Panic Guides and the books generally. So
I was quite excited with Simon's book. I tried to get my broken copy at the ASEC, and they were restricting it. So I wasn't one of the lucky few to get the book at ASEC.
I've got one. I'll sell you for £100.
Of course you will, Simon. And I attended the talk, or what I could of the talk, and I think it is a good time to be talking about this. I mean, the companies that we're seeing leading the market now are those that have focused and shifted to delivering services over products, and it's being called for more and more. So it's key that we have something out there, and it's great that Incosa has this route to publishing, and specifically publishing books in the Don't Panic series that gives us a very consumable introduction to a topic. They're very accessible, the way they're structured, and all of the call outs and the consistent messaging and the way it's presented across the series really helps people to get into them, points out the key pitfalls and the bits that are really key for you to remember and understand. And I think that works really well. And I think you've done a really good job in getting this route to publishing set up, and using it in the way you have to really support the growth of systems engineering across the UK.
Okay, brilliant. So thanks for that, Pemby. So like I say, apologies for, well, I don't mean that apology for putting you on the spot. So
yeah, you better get used to it.
Yeah, I figured it was coming. I looked down the list and went, that's I'm going to get called here. So yes.
So are there any questions that any of the other participants have at this point? Otherwise we'll move on towards the ending. So we'll just give everybody a moment. Okay, that's fine. So we're drawing towards the end now. So like I say, I genuinely think it's a really good addition to the Don't Panic to the Don't Panic range. So if you haven't already got it, head to the Incosa UK website. If you've got any ideas for writing a Don't Panic, or even if you'd like to write one, or even if you'd like to propose that you'd like to see one on a particular subject, then please do just email publications at Incosa UK. I can't remember the rest of the email address, but it's on the website. And like I say, we're getting to the point now where the whole process, the book publishing process, is quite slick now. I'm very encouraged by your kind words, Simon Wright, as well, to say that you've enjoyed the whole. It should be an enjoyable process. So, Simon, what's the next book in your pipeline then? What's next on your agenda? Because the thing is, when you finish a book, there's a bit of you at the back of your mind that goes, right, I'm hooked now. I need to write another one. So, what can we expect from you next, Simon?
Well, there's a competition going on in my mind between two. One is in the Don't Panic series, and one is in my own right. In terms of the Don't Panic, I'm thinking the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Procurement and Acquisition.
Oh, okay.
That,
yeah.
because the other thing is that so many people are in just the procurement and acquisition area.
Yes.
And or delivering to a procurement or acquisition specification.
Yep.
And so something that I always remembered from, oh gosh, this goes a long way back, CMMI.
Yeah.
Is
Capability and maturity model integrated. So.
Absolutely. So I think at the time I was working at CMMI level 3. And so I thought, oh, this is good. And then somebody pointed out that the customer I was delivering to was CMMI level 0. And therefore, the overall CMMI level of this procurement system was 0.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking, well, why should I spend all this time, doing good things at CMMI level 3 when if I deal with a customer who's at 0, where's where's my added benefit? Where's my quid pro quo? So I think no matter which side of the procurement bridge you are, you need to come together at the same level. So I'm thinking that's that one. The other one that I want to write is called The Design of the Universe. But yeah, there you go. I'm
looking forward to that one. I think that's going to be the advanced series of systems engineering, isn't it?
Exactly. Looking at the universe as a system.
Yeah. No, I'd be up for that. Simon?
Yeah, I think it would have to be an advanced.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's brilliant. So again, Simon Wright, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for your contribution to systems engineering as well. It's a really lovely book. Get out there. If you haven't seen it, go on Incozy UK and look at it. Also, we've just recently launched in the last month or so the corporate subscription service as well. So what you've got the ability to do now is if you work for a big company, you can get a corporate license for any number of our publications. So that's the Don't Panic, the Advanced series, the what's going to be rebranded as the Educational series soon. So you can get a corporate license that gives you access for a year and you pay an annual rate depending on the number of copies that you have. And that's for the electronic books. The electronic copies of the books are available as well. To me, you can't really beat a hard copy, but there's electronic copies there as well, which are significantly cheaper to send to Europe these days due to Brexit, but let's not start on that. But yeah, so thanks very much, Simon, for coming along and for your contribution. We're really pleased with the book. It's come out really well, and we're looking forward to your next submission. So I'd like to thank everybody who's come along. This has been recorded and it will be made available on the Incozy UK website. Thanks to Simon Perry as well, who's the series editor, for coming along, and thanks for our impromptu guest Andrew Pemberton, the current president-elect. Although you might be watching this in a couple of years, he might be the president or he might be the immediate past president. It depends when you're watching this. So I'd like to draw the proceedings to a close now. So thanks very much, everybody, for participating, and we'll see you at the next Meet the Author session. Okay. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers all. Bye-bye.